Hey guys, I'm back. I know that everybody's been waiting for me to continue my series, or at least those of you who enjoy it. And this is EX Dragon Frontiers. This set is the Anyways, let's just get to it. This set is the 15th set in the EX era, and is one of the final sets we'll be covering for this entire era. This set is vast and wide, filled with not only fantastic Pokemon, but also fantastic artworks that are iconic and symbolic for the era we find ourselves in. Anyways, in the last video, we found ourselves in the Crystal Caves, but as I go on, we're going to the Dragon's Peak, so we'll see what cool dragons we'll see up there. Dragon Frontiers features a reverse holo pattern that is identical for the past few we've been seeing, where the Pokemon itself is highlighted with that holographic effect, but even if it is the same, it still calls for a wardrobe update. Dragon Frontiers was also released November 8th, 2006, and features a total of 101 cards, and there aren't any secret rares in this set. Alright, we'll get started with these silly reprinted trainers. Here's a list of all the artists that worked on the reprints for this set. Ken Sugimori, Hiromichi Sugiyama, Takumi Akabane, Shinichi Yoshikawa, Koki Saito, and Katsura Tabata. Our final trainer cards were illustrated by Shizuru, whose 3D generations are actually quite generally impressive. Firstly, we have the Hall on Legacy, which has the sun rising in the back with some rocks faces in the foreground. The Old Rod, which shows a little fish underwater going towards the rod, and the Strength Charm, which lays on the ground as a yellow light strikes the area around it. Moving on to our first Pokemon artwork for the set, we have Miki Tanaka's cute and captivating style, as they worked on the Togepi Delta, which grasps onto a rock and looks forwards, the Smoochum Delta, who cries as it stands on the shore, the Swablu Delta, which flies through the sky with a normal look on its face, and the Talo Delta, which flies along with a top-down view in a crevice that can be seen below the Pokemon. Our next artist is Kyoko Umamoto, who worked on the Curlia Delta, which sits atop a mountain as it radiates fire and the sky is red all around it. The Shelgon Delta, which radiates more energy, as it looks to the right and a nice mass of water is behind the Pokemon and it stands in a cave. The Ladybug Delta, which flies along and looks forwards with cute eyes. And finally, the Ralts Delta, which sits cutely down with flowers blooming all around the Pokemon, and it glows orangey red as it looks a little concerned. Moving on to something a little different, we got Yukamori, who worked on the Croconaut Delta, which sits down and looks downwards, the Flaffy Delta, which looks on into the distance and stands atop a rock, the Chikorita Delta, which smiles and steps forwards cutely, and the Ekans Delta, which coils around a tree and looks forwards with a blank stare. Tomokazu Kamiya worked on some very stormy cards for Dragon Frontiers, starting us off with the Vibrava Delta, which glows purple as it flies through the camera, the Horsey Delta, which glides across the water surface looking determined as ever and glows orange, the Dratini Delta, which swims forwards as lightning strikes all around it, and traditional waves are seen below the Pokemon, as it glows green. And the Wooper Delta, which looks up with a great big smile draped over its face, and a flying island can be seen above the Pokemon, which glows yellow. The Wooper itself glows green. Someone who I've been praising recently in my videos is Tsuchiko Adachi, with that 3D, 2D style that I really enjoy. Starting us off, we got the Quagsire Delta, which comes up from some mud and smiles as a river sits behind it. The Seadra Delta, which has a trail behind it as bubbles fly all around it and seaweed sits below it. The Mareep Delta, which walks in a thunderstorm and looks at the camera, and the Vulpix Delta, which looks to the left as more ominous clouds rest above it. Ken Sugimori's here too, which is cool. Yeah, I'll talk about the Elekid Delta, because I like the default pose of Elekid. It is pretty dynamic for a typical pose, but Sugimori also worked on the Electabuzz Delta and the Jinx. Next, we've got Atsuko Nishida, worked on the Cyndaquil Delta, which puts its nose up and glows white as its eyes are closed, the Nidorino Delta, which looks to the right in a menacing pose, and the Dugong Delta, which looks down at the ground as light strikes the water above the Pokemon. Well, it looks like I found myself atop the Crystal Caves, and on the perch of the Dragon's Peak. Ah, that sound is so familiar. Ah! Rayquaza, use Dragon Pulse! Dialga, use Roar of Time. Rayquaza! Ah, why did you do this? I understand that I wanted to break the meteor open, but that doesn't mean that you can just attack me like this. No, you don't understand. I don't want to save the Pokemon inside the meteor. I simply wanted the meteor to strike the planet. The people of this world have no understanding of how to use their Pokemon, and I'm growing tired of it. Dialga, make him forget any of this ever happened. Ah! Man, that hurt my head. So, someone was trying to stop me from firing the lasers so they could wipe out humanity? Well, let's not stay here forever then. Rayquaza! Do you hear my cries? Anyways, guys, when he flies down here, well, I mean, we're gonna be waiting anyways. Let's just get on to the next artist and move on to the holo cards. Unfortunately, one of my favorite artists of this whole era stopped creating cards in this set, being Hisao Nakamura. We've talked about them so many times, and this artist was featured all the way back in Aquapolis. Nakamura also contributed to 10 of the 16 EX era sets, and I think I'll actually miss them. Luckily, they went out with a bang. Firstly, for Nakamura, we have the Delta Totodile, which swims along and jumps up with its mouth wide open, as lightning strikes all around the Pokemon. The Shelter Delta, which looks directly at the camera as water splashes around the Pokemon. The Horsey Delta, which spews out dark ink underwater. The Seadra Delta, which looks up at the camera as the camera looks down at the Pokemon and it swims atop the water. The Arbok Delta, which bears its fangs forwards and looks extremely upset as flames burst off of it. And finally, the Typhlosion Delta Hollow, which looks down to the right as a beautiful, vibrant cloud is seen behind the Pokemon, and its psychic glow radiates the area. Nakamura will be an artist that I miss talking about, but they'll always live on in some of the best sets of the EX era. Masakazu Fukuda worked on the Lickitung Delta, which extends its super long tongue out and glows purple, and the Snorlax Delta, which sits down in the vast, lush environment all around it. This one glows green. Don't worry, we'll talk more about Fukuda later. Next, we have Yukiko Baba, and we have to talk about something interesting here. So, this artist actually reprinted two cards from a previous set, being the Pupitar and the Larvitar. If I'm not mistaken, these two are from EX Dragon or Sandstorm. Anyways, it's kind of weird that an artist reprinted some normal cards. I don't think we've seen that so far. But anyways, they worked on the Trapinch Delta, which looks forward and it lights up purple, with a deep starry night in the background. The Natu Delta, which looks forwards with another night theme, but the sky on this one is deep purple. The Natu glows black. The Feebas Delta, which swims along a beautiful landscape and glows orange. And finally, the Pinsir Delta Hollow, which looks to the left and a nice deep purpley blue sky sits nicely in the background. Hajime Kusujima is one of the other artists with two reprints, so I won't talk about those, but they worked on the Seal Delta, which looks up to the sky as beams of light strike the ground below it, the Nidoran Delta, which rummages around with an upset look on its goofy face, the Bagon Delta, which breaks the rocks around it and looks forward as water flows around the Pokemon, the Ledian Delta, which flies towards it with a mix of fire and ice behind it, the clouds as well. Well, I mean, it's not literal fire and ice, but it's like a desert landscape and then the sky on the right. And finally, the Ninetales Delta Hollow, which is just absolutely gorgeous. It has a similar moon to the Tauros Delta from before, but this card just looks fantastic in my opinion. I love the colors and the contrast of Ninetales' yellow color and the deep tones of the trees and ground below the Pokemon, and I think it just looks awesome. Our next artist is the legendary Midori Harada, who worked on the Trapinch Delta, which lays on its belly and looks to the ceiling. The Nidoran Delta, which shows both kinds of Nidoran prancing along. The Vibrava Delta, which looks at the camera and smiles as it grasps onto a tree. And the Quilava Delta, which looks to the left and flames up the entire area around it. Finally, we have the Milotic Delta Hollow, which is another gorgeous artwork. I love how flowy Harada made Milotic look in this card, and the fiery effects of the Delta species look really nice on a Pokemon like Milotic, who is already typically very majestic. Sumiyoshi Kizuki worked on the Swellow Delta, which flies along glowing yellow with a nice sunset showing off in the background. The Nidorina Delta, which jumps along some rocks and a nice mountain range sits behind the Pokemon, and it glows this steely color so hard all around it. The Mantine Delta swims along the water, and you can even see the surface. The water looks three-dimensional, which I think is pretty cool, as sparks fly towards the Mantine as it glows yellow. And finally, the Meganium Delta, which looks down at a tree stump and looks like it's eating? I'm not sure, but it also glows a fighting type orange color as well. Mitsuhiro Arita worked on the Tropius, which bends its neck along as the sky falls. The Cloister Delta, which smiles as it swims out of a vortex. The Nidoking Delta Hollow, which looks to the right as it enters some kind of cave. And the Heracross Delta Hollow, which looks forwards into the distance as storm clouds form behind the Pokemon. Koki Saito worked on this really cool Larvitar Delta, which looks up and sparks all around it. The Dragonair Delta, which looks forwards with its mouth wide open, and so many clouds surround the Pokemon. The Xatu Delta, which radiates darkness energy and looks forwards. The Togetic Delta, which flies along the sky and looks down as clouds part around the Pokemon. The Nidoqueen Delta Hollow, which looks to the right and smiles, with its claws wide out. Finally, the Feraligatr Delta Hollow, which stands on all fours, rare sight for a Pokemon like Feraligatr, but it makes it look very awesome, and quite menacing. Now, we've got Kagemaru Himeno, worked on the Smeargle Delta, which looks fantastic, as you got some Smeargles painting the area around it and grasping onto its tail while looking to the left, and it holds onto some kind of roof. The Bayleaf Delta, which prances along as its mouth is wide open. The Gligar Delta opens up its arms and sparks fly all around it, and the Ampharos Delta Hollow, which walks along with its arms extended outwards, and mountains are all around the Pokemon. Well, that was a fast review. We're moving on to the final leg of the race, being the EX Pokemon. Our first artist who worked on an EX Pokemon is Shizuru, who worked on the Altaria EX Delta, which swipes along with a wide open mouth, swiping a water slash. The other Delta Species EX they did was the Latios Delta Species EX, which is kind of confusing to say. Anyways, it shoots out flames all around it and it looks at the camera, and flames light up the Pokemon's eyes, which I think looks pretty cool, and actually pretty menacing. Nakaoka returned on the Flygon EX Delta, which wipes many different psychic effects all around it, and swirls of yellow and orange light up the background of the Pokemon, make it look very cool and menacing. And I think it's pretty cool that we can see Nakaoka working on an EX Pokemon because I don't think that they've ever done that before, and this is going to be the only time they ever do, so yeah, I'm happy that they did. Now, we have a new artist entering the scene, being Masahiko Ishii, who worked on the Kingdra EX Delta, which swims along as an elastic wave forms all around the Pokemon. It looks forwards, which I think looks really nice and dynamic, and the Gardevoir EX Delta, which floats downwards majestically and flames fall with the Pokemon, which looks stunning. And another new artist introduced and extroduced in this set, being Yusuke Yoshimada, who worked on the Tyranitar EX Delta, which does look really cool, as it roars forwards and lightning strikes all around it. I think that the Tyranitar's green works really well with the light blue electricity background. Too bad this artist never worked on any other card after this. Our final artist for EX cards is, of course, Ryo Ueda, who worked on the Dragonite EX Delta, which flows down to the ground as it glows green, and a swirling vortex of blue and teal set behind the Pokemon. The Latios EX Delta, which shows waves of different shapes and sizes all around the Pokemon, and Latios itself glows blue. The Rayquaza EX Delta, which opens up its mouth as purple lightning is all around the Pokemon and it glows yellow. And finally, the Salamence EX Delta, which looks directly at the camera with a mouth wide open, glowing a nice blue hue, with some really nice looking red in the background. Our final artist is Masakazu Fukuda's Gold Star Pokemon. These ones are quite cool. Some very popular Pokemon they did for this set. Firstly, we have the Charizard Gold Star, Delta Species, which blows fire out and burns the border of the card, which is a very dynamic and cool looking Charizard card. And the Mew Delta Gold Star, which shoots out its tail forwards and seems to be smiling as water shoots off of it. These two Gold Star cards really represent not only the Gold Stars we were used to seeing in the EX era, but also represent the Delta Species Pokemon as well, which is nice, because unfortunately, this is the last set to ever feature Delta Species Pokemon, which is sad to say, but Delta Species are no more. When it comes to my favorite cards from the set, I'd probably have to say my favorite cards in the set are the Mew Gold Star, Dragonite, Flygon, Gardevoir, Kingdra, Latias, Latios, and the Salamence EX. And then the Ampharos for Alligator, Heracross, Milotic, Nidoking, Ninetales, Pinsir, and the Typhlosion Hollow. And then the Arbok, Ledian, Mantine, Quagsire, Vibrava, Xatu, Dragonair, Horsey, Shelgon, Smeargle, Togepi, Vibrava, Ekans, Natsu, Nidoran, Trapinch number 68 and 69, and the Wooper. Anyways, guys, that was EX Dragon Frontiers, a really fantastic set filled with many cards that I think are some of the best in the entire EX era, and maybe even some of the best cards we've ever seen so far. Honestly, the EX era was filled with so many amazing and fantastic artworks and cards that... Oh, wait a second, there's one more set that I have to cover. Honestly, if I were to give this set a rating, I'd probably give it a 9.1 out of 10, and that's the highest rating I've given so far for any of these EX era sets. I gave Crystal Guardians around an 8.2, and then I gave Hall on Phantoms around an 8.7, but I do think that this set is a little bit better than both of them actually now that I'm looking at it. This set features many strong holo cards, such as the Ampharos for Alligator, and you get all three of the starters. You also get some really beautiful Delta Species Pokemon. Most of the cards in the set are Delta Species. Beautiful colors. Many different artists are featured in this set. Sure, yeah, there's a couple regular Pokemon as reprints, but I think that the EX cards in this set are all phenomenal. The Gold Stars are really great in this set, and I think that this set is like one of the best EX era sets, if not one of the best sets we've ever received. So yeah, that's why I'm justifying my ranking. Unfortunately, it is weighed down a little bit by Ken Sugimori artworks, as well as some reprints, but if those weren't in the set, I could see the set being easily like a 9.5, maybe even a 9.6. And yeah, that's why this set I think is a 9.1. Anyways, guys, join me in my next video in EX Power Keepers where we try to find out the truth. And, I'm probably going to figure out more about my lore. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you did, make sure you leave a like, comment, and get ready for EX Power Keepers because it's going to be the grand finale to this whole EX era streak. And then we'll be moving on to a different era, which is pretty exciting as I'm actually kind of getting pretty far in these videos. And these videos were only made to just kind of like be for fun. I mean, that's what my channel started out with. My channel started out with my base set review, and that was 3 months ago, and we're already almost at finished with the EX era, so I'm actually quite happy to be almost done. Not gonna lie. Anyways, guys, hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.